Councillor Brendan.
I acknowledge the traditional owners, the custodians of the land on which we meet, the Tasmanian Aboriginal people. I pay respect to elders past and present and recognise their continuing spiritual connection to the land. Before we commence with tonight's meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect before we commence with the meeting. Thank you, councillors. Please be seated. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this council meeting on Monday, the 19th of December 2022. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on council website. Our second item regards apologies. There are none. I acknowledge, however, that Councillor Goyne is joining us tonight via video link. Good evening, Councillor Goyne.
Good evening.
Are there any declarations of interest of councillors or close associates? Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to item 8.4.3 on the agenda, and I'm wondering whether you feel that perhaps you should declare an interest given your public statements on this issue.
Councillor Mulder, this has been dealt with in to some great extent in workshops, as you and colleagues are very well aware. I will, however, ask the General Manager to make a comment on that, just to clarify the situation, so there's no need for any further comment in this regard. Thank you, CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. As we've discussed in a variety of circumstances, there are well-established areas of the law that deal with the issues associated with election campaigning versus decision-making by appointed councils and other bodies. And in the circumstance of tonight's item, being focused on the decision at hand and having an open mind in terms of the issues to be considered and the decisions to be made is what counts, not no particular weight is given to previous statements. Thank you.
Right, so are there any other declarations of interest of councillors or close associates? I will also just make the point too, it's not up to individual councillors to suggest that other councillors may have an interest. It's up to individual councillors to declare their interest. That's quite clear under the Act. Moving now on to item 4.1, confirmation of the minutes of the last council meeting held on the 28th of November. These have been circulated. Are there any issues arising? There being none, and noting this as part of the omnibus item. 4.2, Mayor's communication. I'll just note that my diary entries from the 29th of November through to the 19th of December 2022 have been circulated for meetings and events that I've attended, as well as the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Hume, Councillor Goyne and Councillor Warren on my behalf. Moving now on to council workshops. Noting the workshops held on the 5th and 12th of December. Councillor, Deputy Mayor? No, nothing there. Okay. Moving now on to tabling petitions. CEO, are there any petitions?
Thank you, Mayor. No, there are no petitions tonight.
Thank you. Moving now on to 4.5, reports from outside bodies. The first one is, and reports from single and joint authorities. I note that I attended the annual general meeting on the 6th of December of the Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority, at which meeting Councillor James Walker was unanimously elected as Chair of the Authority, subject to this Council's decision at agenda item 8.4.2 at the appointment to committees. So without wishing to jump the gun or preempt the decision of this Council, congratulations, Councillor Walker. In regards to Taswater, I have nothing to report there. The Greater Hobart Committee, I can report that the 4 Metro Mayors, we met on the 7th of December. It was a highly productive meeting with Minister Street, as well as finalising and prioritising our 23-24 state budget submission as well. Are there any other reports from council and special committee and other representative bodies from councillors? Right, there being none, I move on to the weekly briefing reports for the 28th of November, the 5th and 12th of December. Are there any matters arising?
Question through you, Mr Mayor. Is it possible to have a hard copy or a paper copy available at the GM's desk for us to peruse, as distinct from accessing it via the electronic gadgetry that we all seem to have to be able to come to grips with in this day and age? So my question through you to the Senior Executive Officer is as to whether it's possible to receive a hard copy of the weekly briefing reports, should it be the case of us calling into the council chambers and collecting same.
Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, we can put that into your pigeonhole for you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other items that colleagues would like to raise with regards to the weekly briefing reports? Right, there being none, I put the omnibus motion. Call for a mover of that motion, please. Thank you, Councillor Chong, seconded Councillor Kennedy. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Moving now on to public question time. There are no questions, public questions on notice. Are there any questions without notice from the gallery? Right, there being none. We move now on to deputations by members of the public. CEO, are there any deputations, please?
Thank you, Mayor. We have two deputations tonight. The first deputation is Mr Greg Hudson on behalf of Shamroad.
So, Mr Hudson, as you're aware, there's 3 minutes allowed. It's a hard 3 minutes, so yep. I apologise in advance if it goes over, but 3 minutes, the floor is yours.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors of the City of Clarence, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening as you decide a number of matters related to the future development of Kangaroo Bay that will create multi-year impacts on the community amenity in that waterfront precinct area. You'll have read the Council Officer's report that outlines that in 2008, Council started a process to create a significant visitor destination in the Kangaroo Bay precinct. In 2017, Shamroad entered into a sale and development agreement with Council. Some 6 years later, after very significant efforts and expenses by all parties involved, we are very close to making it happen. Over the past few months, under the standstill agreement, Shamroad commissioned 2 leading hotel design architectural firms to reimagine Kangaroo Bay. Tonight, we have submitted that new concept design for you to consider. There were 5 design criteria. Firstly, that the hotel must be iconic. It must actually create a sense of place on the waterfront, in the yacht environment and in the cove that makes up Kangaroo Bay. Secondly, it must be a destination in its own right. It must attract visitors and locals to use the amenity of the area. Thirdly, it must activate and connect the axis between Rosny and Bellary Village. It must have public access and amenity in that access through and between Kangaroo Bay Hotel. Fourthly, it must address the concerns of the community and specifically those concerns related to the Cambridge Road sightlines. And fifthly and finally, it must address and provide comfort to Council around the timelines for delivery. Specifically, Shamroad has committed in the draft development agreement that it will deliver against 3 sets of dates based on approval this evening to progress. Firstly, in March 2023, 3 months away, Shamroad would submit pre-assessment designs and compliance arrangements. By June, 6 months from now, it would lodge its full development application, and finally, by December 2023, it would commence construction. Let there be no doubt about Shamroad's commitment. It wants to build the new hotel in Kangaroo Bay, and we seek your support to do that job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Hudson. Chief Executive Officer.
Our second deputation tonight is from Mr Finlay Zhang on behalf of Shamroad.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Councillors. I prepare a full page, so I'll just accelerate my speed. As a representative of Shamroad Australia, I'm here to brief you on 3 key matters in my 3 minutes. These 3 matters are commitment, new concept, and community consultation. Firstly, our commitment. Shamroad signed the first MOU with former Premier on behalf of the state government and TASTAFE in 2016. Since then, Shamroad has invested more than 12 million trying to bring the project to construction stage by working with TASTAFE and UTAS, the proposed collaborative partners. Under our joint ISDA with Council, both the existing dinghy shade and house has been removed from the project site. Undertook an extensive land reclamation and relocation of the underground services. We conduct many geotech, environmental, and related studies to support the construction stage of the hotel and education facilities. Immediately prior to the COVID, we tendered with local major construction companies for the construction of the full site. And in total, 4 times of tendering for both staged and full project construction has been done during the past 6 years. Shamroad is here today to restate our total commitment to progressing the project to bring a new vibrance to and life to the Kangaroo Bay precinct. Secondly, our new concept to enliven the Kangaroo Bay. Our proposed new concept now is viewable as both multiple perspective and in a video walk-around can be viewed by visiting Council's website as well as our company's website, shamroad.com.au. The keywords related to the new concept are destination, iconic, activation, connectivity, and green plaza. The new Kangaroo Bay will become the link between Ballarat Village and Roseney. It will enable the activation along the commercial and the social access to create greater social amenity as a part of the Council City Heart project. Thirdly and finally, our commitment to the community consultation. The proposed draft development agreement would terminate the old ISDA while preserving Council's buyback rights and would enable the DA to be launched by next June and construction of the hotel commence by December 2023. We have committed to a 2-stage process to engage with Clarence community. In particular, with immediate and nearby neighbours, the key industry stakeholders about the new concept. As the first step towards community engagement, we have submitted a draft consultation process to Council, and we're looking forward to process in the new year. In conclusion, Shamroad is a unique position to fast-track the Kangaroo Bay precinct development, and we are committed to progressing the new concept, and as the first step towards construction, we will engage with Clarence community in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Zhang. Any other? That's it, right. Thank you. I now advise that Council intends to act as a planning authority and call on the first item, which is item 7.1, which is a development application for 26A Esplanade at Linders Farm for a boat, shed and jetty. Is there a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Hume. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Councillor Hume.
Yes, I just wanted to point out in relation to development, there's been a number of concerns raised by representatives. I understand that, and I did go down and have a look at the site to see for myself. A number of the concerns related to issues that were actually outside the planning scheme. And one of those in particular was water safety, which is actually a matter for Marine and Safety Tasmania. Doesn't fall under the development criteria, so it's not actually something that Council can deal with in a planning decision. The report's fairly comprehensive. I think the planning officers have done a good job. I appreciate the concerns that representatives have, but I believe this development is compliant with the scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, mirroring, echoing some of those comments, and I think it's important to note that the planning scheme is not something we can fiddle with unless we have planning reasons, and valid planning reasons at that. And it's a salient point to remind everyone that council's capacity to manage development applications like this one or grand scale projects is extremely limited by planning controls. Here we have a case where the planning controls, which we are forced to abide by, must be implemented. And to suggest that council can control other projects by using planning controls is simply a nonsense, because those projects are controlled by the planning scheme, which is an instrument of the planning minister and the state government, not of this council. So, as much as I might consider that the issues relating to this thing are basically those of MAST, and the date of their advice and the date of their report is not a planning matter. Unfortunately, we cannot go and ask MAST to reconsider their advice under changed circumstances. As such, we must execute our responsibilities under the planning scheme, and we cannot use them to impose our will on any developer.
Are there any other speakers on this matter? Thank you, Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's interesting to note that on page 16, on para 4.4, the clause 29.4.1A2 in relation to the front setback, buildings must have a setback from the frontage of no less than 5 metres or no more than less than a maximum. And under the scheme, a frontage is defined as a boundary of a lot which abuts a road. In this particular case, the setback is not in accordance with the performance criteria, or let's start with the acceptable solutions, because buildings must have a setback from a frontage that is compatible with the streetscape and minimises opportunities for crime and other social behaviour, antisocial behaviour. And also on page 19, there is also a discretion sought in relation to the National Natural Assets Code. And that is that, and I quote from the officer's report, the proposed development does not meet the requirements listed from A to C in the acceptable solutions. Therefore, the proposed development is to be required to be assessed against the performance criteria, which we know is the case. However, the buildings and the setbacks are not in line, and they only basically meet that acceptable solutions by the abutment to a road. So on a couple of instances here, it does not meet the acceptable solutions. In my opinion, it does not meet the performance criteria, and therefore I think that in this circumstances I will not support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor James. Are there any other speakers to this item? Councillor Walker.
Look, thank you, Mr Mayor. We did receive representations on this from some of the neighbouring, I'm going to say businesses and community, and their concerns are real. It is a congested bay, and I can understand why they're worried about the complexities that this brings forward. It's already been explained quite eloquently by the motion's mover about, and indeed the seconder, around the matters that relate to masks handling and what we deal with tonight. And that, again, if the motion is passed, it's indeed doing so, not washing our hands of the fact that there's an impact, but understanding our role as a planning authority and the constraints around that. I would suggest, as I said, I mentioned that the Motor Yacht Club and nearby are some other boat sheds. I don't think they're entirely recreational. I would suggest that there probably is some commercial activity happening with them. And I bring this up for the reason that there is a car parking contribution expected in Lindisfarne, and plenty of shops in that area have, if you like, prior allowances that become almost null and void if they go into a change of use situation. And I would suggest that I think there's a case that a contribution could have been required in this instance. Some concerns have been raised, but I would note that I'm probably not the best person at checking my emails, but I'd like to think I do a satisfactory job. I haven't received an alternate, and I think it's really important to say this. If you think that there's real issues, then I think it's beholden to make the case with an alternate. And yes, your colleagues around the chamber might pick it to pieces, but if that's what you sincerely believe there are reasons for, there is the input and the dialogue, and I might enter in firmly of the belief that a motion should be passed, and that dialogue can and does change things as we go through. So I think that's important. I would express concern if we end up with a situation like we did last meeting, where motions failed and alternates weren't put forward and it was left to the officers. I could finger wag around, abrogation of responsibility, etc. I won't do that, but I will point out, and I think it is entirely pertinent, that we've just received the third iteration of the local government review, and they've spelt out entirely what they want, or nodded towards it, which is that it won't be this chamber, it won't be people that live in amongst the community and have, if you like, the on-the-ground practical experience as well as doing the job as planning authorities. It'll be an anonymous bureaucrat in Murray Street. That's where it's probably heading. And when you don't bring up an alternate, when you abrogate your responsibilities like what happened last week, you're effectively giving a nice big box in Christmas tape and baubles to say, here's a really good excuse to champion. When the second biggest council in the state doesn't undertake that activity, there's a really strong case to make to take it away from us. And I don't think that would lead to better planning outcomes for the people of Clarence. So that said, all up, on balance and with the officer's recommendations, I feel compelled to support the motion, noting that it will have a ramification, but those main issues and concerns lay out of our control.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this matter? There being none, I put the motion. All those in favour of the recommendation? Oh, my apologies. Thank you, Councillor Hume. My apologies.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to comment on the performance criteria in regards to streetscape. So there were five performance criteria assessed. One of them was in relation to variations in building alignment to break up long building facades. It was noted in the report that while the proposed boat shed will be located closer to the street frontage than other buildings, there were other buildings that had a similar alignment. It was noted that in relation to B, providing a forecourt or space would not be appropriate, given the nature of the development. It's a boat shed. There were no concealment spaces. In relation to D, there wasn't a need to provide passive surveillance because it's located 4 metres below street level, and the proposal includes lighting. So those were all five of the performance criteria addressed in relation to that setback and streetscape use standard. So I believe that has been adequately addressed. Thank you.
Councillor Hume, thank you. I think I can now safely put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you. I now advise that Council concludes its deliberations as a planning authority and move now on to noting that there's no petitions tabled at previous council meetings. There's nil asset management issues, nor are there any financial management issues. We move on to 8.4 governance and 8.4.1 the quarterly report to the 30th of September 2022. It's been provided and circulated. I'll seek a mover of that quarterly report. Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Councillor Hunter, do you wish to speak to the quarterly report?
I'd just like to say that it's a very comprehensive report for a quarterly report, and I think the councillors have done an excellent job of compiling that. It's always quite amazing to see how much work this council does for the community, so thanks to council staff for putting it together.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Hunter. Deputy Mayor.
Only rise to echo the sentiments of the mover.
Thank you. Are there any other colleagues wishing to comment on the quarterly report? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I would like to refer to the weekly briefing report and on page 6. And my question may be appropriate to either the Chief Executive Officer or to Mr Graham, if he's here.
If you ask the question, we'll then determine where it goes.
And I'm about to, thank you. Pass Road. It has been said that the council has allocated funding to survey, design and deliver road reconstruction of the pavement on Pass Road between Winterbourne and Connor Place. Has there been any other funding that has been earmarked in relation to, other than what has been allocated for survey, design and deliver road reconstruction?
Thank you, Councillor James. Ms Coombs, are you in a position to... Oh, Angela, sorry. Sorry, Ms Moore. Sorry, my apologies.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's a big department.
Through you, Mayor, we haven't had any additional funding for that project at this stage, but the design work will inform a future budget request for next financial year. I think there's also an opportunity to seek grant funding, which I think has been put through as a potential for next financial year with the state or federal government as something that we might consider seeking additional funding for.
Thank you, Ms Moore. Councillor James.
Thank you. On page 11, under Rosny Hill, Council continued to work with the proponents on reviewing key sublease terms for the Rosny Hill site during the quarter. Is it possible to be, for Council and the members of the public to be advised of the current situation in relation to a sublease?
Councillor James, thank you. I'll ask Mr Pass to answer that one, please.
Through you, Mayor, Council has received some further feedback from the proponents in recent weeks. We're just working on some responses and we'll circulate a briefing update to councillors and provide an update to the community as soon as possible.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Finally, thank you.
Yes.
On page 22, a people-friendly city, it refers to deliver and build on the homelessness action plan. In the old council, I moved a motion in relation to provide some homeless shelter for the homeless at the old Rosny Golf Club. Is it possible for one of the officers to sort of give us an update on the council's homelessness action plan, please?
Thank you. Ms Cockburn, you might be the most appropriate person.
Mayor, let me just take this off. We are currently working on the homelessness action plan through our community development programs, and we're preparing an options paper on possibilities for different approaches to helping assist with homelessness people in the city. It's a complex issue which will require quite a complex approach.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor James. Are there any other questions? Right, the motion is that the quarterly report be accepted. It's moved by Councillor Hunter, it's seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 8.4.2, the appointment to committees, boards and authorities. There's a recommendation. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Kennedy.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor, as per the recommendation.
Councillor Hunter.
Same.
Are there any colleagues wishing to speak on this matter? Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's only just an observation, and I know we like to put politics behind us, but I noticed that the Chief Executive Officer Review Committee consists entirely of members of the Better Clarence team, and it causes me a little concern that this important role, with all the responsibility of the Chief Executive, is that we are moving towards doing this. I appreciate that there are no other nominations and that it has to be this way, but I just sometimes wonder about the optics of these sorts of behaviours.
All right, well, I'll answer that firstly by reminding you that there's no privilege in this chamber, Councillor Mulder, and that Councillor Goyne was not a member of the Better Clarence team, and to suggest that that was the case is absolutely misleading and totally incorrect.
I just look at page 46, and the Chief Executive Officer Review Committee is yourself, Councillor Ritchie and Councillor Goyne.
Councillor Mulder, as I just said to you a moment ago, Councillor Goyne was not a member of the Better Clarence team, and I remind you that Councillor Ritchie has been elected Deputy Mayor of the city. Colleagues during workshops and through an extensive process arrived at nominations which are before us this evening. I remind you, privilege does not exist in this chamber for you or anyone else to make false claims.
Just on a point of order, Mr.
One moment, please. No, sit down.
Sit. You're on the Better team here. You're one and Alison.
Councillor James, you're very well aware that the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor have been elected by the people of this great city.
Absolutely.
So,
no problems.
So with all these things, there are winners and there are losers. There was this extensive process here where we arrived as a collective, all 12 of us, where nominations and interests were sought from colleagues. And to use this platform today in a public forum in such a tawdry fashion is unbecoming and very unseemly. So the motion is the motion. It has been moved and it has been seconded. If there's an alternate motion, put the alternate motion. But the motion is before the chair. Councillor Mulder, you've spoken already. Are there any other people wishing to speak?
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Point of order is accepted, yes.
My point of order is that to describe what is a legitimate expression of interest as tawdry is something that probably requires an apology or at least a retraction. It may have been inappropriate, but it wasn't tawdry.
Well, Councillor Mulder, as I remind you, privilege does not apply in this place. Councillor Goyne was not a member, has never been a member of the Better Clarence team. You stated that she was.
My point of order is...
Your point of order is not accepted. Please take your seat. The motion is before the chair. The motion has been moved and seconded. Moved by Councillor Kennedy, seconded by Councillor Hunter. All those in favour, please raise their hand. Oh, Councillor Kennedy, would you like a right to reply?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I'm sorry, I wasn't aware.
So I did call for other speakers, Councillor James. Councillor Walker, sorry, my apologies. Would you like to make a contribution?
Yes, I would, if that's possible.
It is. Yes, it is. I'm sorry we've been a bit set off track here.
Look, that's all right. It is sometimes a rough and bumpy ride to Damascus. Look, just a couple of points on this, and you know, I'm happy to state that I did not express an interest in the CEO's review. My philosophy through this whole process had been pitch for the ones that you thought you were the best value proposition and the best value add for council, and then I thought it was my expectation that there would have been, as part of a workshop, almost a line-by-line chat about each one and almost like a top trumps proposal of strengths, weaknesses, etc. So that I guess was my anticipation, and I'm totally comfortable with the fact that, as I said, I didn't express the point of that. I was happy to step up if that was wanted, but people that have expressed interest wish to continue with that, and that's totally fine. So I do have some concerns around burden sharing with this. As I said, I picked what I thought with the prudence, and I'm probably not carrying my ample weight in that regard when we look at sort of where the workload's been distributed. So I will be supporting this. I'm hopeful my colleagues will indeed endorse me to sit on COPing as the chair. I think it's a really important time. But I think it comes to the point, I do have concerns around the workshop process, and I guess I'm feeling that, I still think that we probably should have continued with a similar sort of workshop load, so to really sort of been able to drill down to these things. I thank everybody for stepping into the different roles, and I think that everybody will indeed give it their best, and that's probably enough from me.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Are there any other speakers? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I hadn't intended to speak on this motion because I felt it would be very well supported around the council chamber this evening, and certainly didn't expect campaigning issues to be brought into the chamber this evening for me, for Councillor Goyne, or indeed for any of the other candidates that stood for election, many of whom came from various backgrounds. But what I do want to do is say that, by and large, in the process that we all work through for people to put themselves forward, with the intent, I have no doubt, every single person that nominated for committees to which we are ready, able, willing to work, I congratulate them for doing that. As Councillor Walker has just said, I'm sure we all work through a process, a natural process of nominating for the areas of interest that we have and trying to negotiate those out with colleagues in a very collegial manner to try and come up with the best balance that works for people as well as possible. And I'm well aware that people stood aside for others to acknowledge their interest, a particular interest in different areas of committee work, and that's highly commendable. I'm a little disappointed to see something like that come into the chamber this evening. I hope we don't see a repeat of it, and I thank my colleagues for their support otherwise.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ritchie. Are there any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, right of reply, Councillor Kennedy.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Wonderful. Now we move on to item 8.4.3, which is Shambroad request for extension of time and modified development proposal for a hotel. Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Mayor. As raised with councillors on Friday afternoon, following some discussion, I've provided an amended recommendation which includes reasons at recommendation B for not consenting to Shambroad's request for a further extension of time. That has been circulated to councillors.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, are you moving that?
I certainly am.
Thank you. Councillor Goyne, are you seconding that? Thank you. Moved and seconded. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to support the motion in support of the amended officer's recommendations in respect to the request by Shambroad Overseas Investment Australia Proprietary Limited, Shambroad, for Council to consider an extension of time to the current Sale and Development Agreement, SDA, and also to consider a modified development proposal for the Kangaroo Bay Wharf site. For those who've been monitoring this issue, you will be aware of the long history associated with the Kangaroo Bay site over the past 14 years, following the adoption of the Kangaroo Bay Urban Design Strategy and Concept Plan in 2008, and also since Council entered into the SDA with Shambroad in 2017. And without going into the extensive detail that is provided in the Council report and in many other documents that have been circulated over many months and years, in short, the following elements of the SDA are at issue this evening. A, under the SDA, Shambroad is required to develop the land as a hotel and hospitality training school for related uses. And B, Shambroad is also required to achieve substantial commencement of the development within 12 months of the completion of the SDA. Not having satisfied either of those two requirements, since 2017, Shambroad has sought and been granted 3 requests for time extensions, and now seeks a 4th time extension and to propose a modified development proposal that no longer features a hospitality training school. The responses to both of these requests must now be provided by Council by 5 p.m. on the 21st of December 2022, under the terms of the standstill agreement settled on the 14th of October 2022. With regard to the evidence and submissions placed before Council, including the opportunity for Shambroad to put forward its case in respect of these matters, and those presentations have been appreciated, the Council has taken the necessary steps to ensure the delivery of an objective recommendation from Council's officers
And those recommendations are to deny the request for a further time extension and deny the acceptance of the modified development proposal. The rationale behind the recommendations shows substantial cause and have been informed by all relevant facts and circumstances, and the reasons why Council is not satisfied are clearly articulated and appropriately confined to the matters that are germane to the SDA. At this point, while not a feature that is impacted on Council's recommendations before the Chamber tonight, I'd like to recognise the community interest in matters such as returning Kangaroo Bay back to public ownership, which may be dealt with by the Council at a future meeting on or before the 12th of April 2023, as we are all aware, and the desire expressed by many to reconsult with the community in relation to the Kangaroo Bay Urban Design Strategy and Concept Plan, which many consider is now out of date given the length of time since its original adoption. All of these matters are highly relevant to the site, and I'm sure will have a place in future considerations, but are not part of our decision-making processes tonight, but simply want to pay respect and acknowledgement to those issues. However, in returning to the matters at hand, I believe that there are entirely solid and objectively reasonable grounds to support the recommendation before the Council, and I ask councillors to support the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Goyne.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate what Deputy Mayor Alison Ritchie has put forward. Completely wholeheartedly agree with her and her sentiments, and want to say that I support the current officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Any other speakers on this motion? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and fellow councillors. I've been here since day one when we actually went through the process of signing off on the sale and development agreement with Chambord. And we've had a number of extensions over the time, and this would be, if it was granted, the 5th extension. And by the very nature of adopting this resolution, or this recommendation of Council, will in fact, in my opinion, drag out the buyback provisions that I believe this Council could act upon now. On the 11th hour, basically, before the 12th of October 2022, we received a modified agreement or a deed, and this Council made a decision in relation to giving and providing the General Manager, the Senior Executive Officer, to work in the best interest of the Council to determine, on what basis we may need to consider the modified plan. And therefore we have to make a decision before the deadline on 5 p.m. on the 21st of December. The simple fact of the matter is we're dealing with two things tonight. We're dealing with an extension of time, and also we're talking about as to whether or not the modified agreement ought to go ahead in relation to the next stages of the development of a hotel only, and not basically what has been part and parcel of the sale and development agreement. So Chambord had every opportunity, because it gained a planning approval some couple of years ago, but did not seek the building approval. And the building approval was basically for the physical foundation works below and at ground level to provide the basic foot and groundworks to be able to start the project. If they had done that, if they had got that approval, then we wouldn't be discussing it today, because presumably the hotel and the training centre would have been under construction, because the sale and development agreement included the hotel and the training centre. It's my understanding that the modified plan that's going to be put forward will not include the training facility. It may include, in my opinion, a larger building, and that may abut Cambridge Road. So the buildings B and C that have always been part of the SDA will no longer be part and parcel of the Southern Development Agreement. The other point I want to make is in relation to the substantial commencement. Right up to the 12th of October, there had been no substantial commencement, and therefore this council, the old council, may have or could have decided not to grant an extension of time, and it may have decided to initiate the buyback. That was basically taken out of the hands of the council and put basically in the hands of the CEO to be able to come up with some sort of agreement, and that's where we come to the standstill agreement that has been negotiated between council and Shamroad Overseas Investment Company. The simple fact of the matter is that if we change the SDA, and that may mean that maybe a hold on the buyback provisions before the 11th of April 2023, the modified agreement may come into place, and that would then go through a different process under the statutory provisions of what we call under LUPA, and that is the advertising and so on and so forth, which will stall, in my opinion, the April 2023 buyback provision. In my opinion, and it's only my opinion, I would have liked to have thought that we want to buy back the land. A number of candidates stood in this election and said, buy it back now. You know, it was a dud agreement in the first instance, having inherited this dud deal from the previous council. You know, I will not support this.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Hunter. So, sorry, you got my eye first. Yep, Councillor Hunter, thank you, and then Councillor Warren. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I definitely appreciate what Councillor Ritchie has said, and I also understand your sentiment, Councillor James. However, I want to make it very clear that we have been provided very sound legal advice, that this is a process that we must follow. And first we have to go through the steps on the items we're discussing tonight, and then we can discuss the potential of a buyback. Now, I have questions as well about the sale of this land and obviously have concerns. However, I believe what I've seen for the new proposed development is vastly different than what was initially put out for consultation some while ago. Being a curious and considered person, I actually think that it would be a disservice to our community not to allow the community to see this new proposal and provide input, and then allow us to make our decision, because their views might have changed. It's no longer as large, it has connectivity, it has public spaces. Whether or not that is good, let's wait and listen to the community, and then we can make the decision before April.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a simple question of whether Shamroad have fulfilled the terms of the Sales and Development Agreement. Did they demonstrate substantial commencement? No. Could they have? Undoubtedly. Other building works and major hotel developments have continued around Hobart during the last 5 years. Despite a number of extensions, all of which I've voted against, Shamroad has not begun work. Whether commencing the works without a hospitality school provider in place would have been ethical is not the question here. We need to decide whether Shamroad could have begun the works, and if for whatever reason they chose not to, then they are in breach of the contract and the sale and the development agreement lapses. Tourism industry heavyweight Luke Martin tells us the hospitality school component of the original development always seemed very far-fetched. So I suspect Shamroad doesn't want an extension any more than we do. So I'll be voting against the request for an extension, as I have consistently during my 4 years on council. There's no legal requirement for us to consider an alternative proposal, and indeed Shamroad have not provided sufficient detail or undertaken the appropriate community consultation for us to do so tonight. So I do not intend to discuss the merits or otherwise of the last-minute proposal provided to us, except to note that the design criteria require the development to demonstrate a sense of place. The built form must integrate with the waterfront, yachts and surrounding natural bushland. Now, I'm not convinced that any of the designs I've seen over the last 5 years meet that criterion, and I can think of at least 4. This is not a planning matter. We're not bound by the Tasmanian planning scheme. We're only bound by the expectations and trust of those who elected us and who we are here to represent. I've been told an iconic hotel is part of the master plan for this area, but that was a decision by a previous council. Perhaps this new council would like to see us move in a different, less heavily developed direction, which is more in keeping with the original concept design supported by the community. I won't be influenced by people telling us if we don't grab this chance we might miss out. As long as we have prime waterfront at a bargain basement price, compared to Sydney for example, I doubt we'll ever be short of interested developers. Last term, some aldermen expressed concern that Clarence's reputation would suffer if we did not give Shamroad everything they asked for. Well, Clarence Council has played this absolutely by the book, with extension after extension. It is Shamroad whose reputation is at stake for failing to deliver time after time. It's time to end this sale and development agreement and take stock.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. I, like Councillor Hunter, do recognise that there are significant improvements as far as the modified proposal is concerned in terms of removing the buildings at the frontage of Cambridge Road, in opening up public space, in having connectivity through the area. I also believe that there are significant potential benefits in having accommodation in that area, and particularly 5-star accommodation. I've often argued for many years, even since I was previously on council, that Clarence should have a much bigger slice of the visitor economy. The main reason that I'm supporting the officer's recommendation not to accept the modified proposal, and I think there's unanimous agreement that we cannot agree to another extension, because Shamroad themselves have admitted that it'd be very difficult to deliver on the hospitality training school, which is a necessary component of that development to be able to proceed with the SDA. But having said that, the main reason why I wouldn't accept the modified proposal now, or believe we shouldn't, is because the modified proposal has been available to the public for 53 minutes exactly, and it's up to Shamroad to sell their proposal, to win the hearts and minds of the community. I believe they have potentially a strong case to make, but let's see, what comes from their consultation. It is, not accepting it now, and we have to. The words "not accept" are in motion because we have to make a decision on this by 5 p.m. on the 21st. Doesn't close the door to potentially looking at that proposal or some sort of proposal from Shamroad. Now, there will also be arguments about exercising the buyback option, which would be triggered by refusing extension. It would be imprudent to immediately exercise the buyback option, because Shamroad are the ones who are best placed at the moment, being the owners of the land, being the preferred developers, and having invested heavily and stating that they continue to be committed to this site to develop something there. The question, if we exercise the buyback, is what would replace it? Would we have a developer that is as committed? And if we don't, I have heard arguments about having some kind of public development there, but what would that be? What are the needs? There's a whole lot of conversations that would need to happen about that. But I point out that We received the land transferred from the state government, we received a $5 million grant from the federal government on the basis that we would implement the Kangaroo Bay Urban Design and Concept Plan, which includes a mix of private and public development. That plan was to unlock public benefits and social benefits as well as economic and commercial activity. That was the purpose of that plan. That's the plan we have in place and the basis on which we've proceeded. And if we go in a different direction, and there was already substantial public development, public benefit on the site in the Kangaroo Bay area, if we go in a different direction, there's a whole lot of eggs we'd have to unscramble. So let's just see how this plays out in terms of consulting on the modified proposal, which was released at 7 p.m. today. See what the community has to say about it, and I look forward to seeing how this progresses.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Darko.
I would like to speak to my main objection to the new proposal, and that is that there has been no public consultation by Shambroad. Not only did they put off releasing the proposal until the agenda was released, they withheld the design documentation from the public until, as Councillor Hume notes, the very beginning of this meeting, which is completely inadequate. In my view, developers should be working with the community every single step of the way, and they shouldn't get to the stage of putting forward a proposal until that has the support of the majority of the community in which that proposal is going to take place. I would say that Shambroad in this instance has actually treated the community of Clarence with complete disrespect, treating them to a proposal that they have no chance to give input on before it's voted on. I would urge everyone to reject this and to also send that message that we need to have a much greater standard of community consultation for any further proposals going forward.
Councillor Darko. Councillor Mulder, were you wanting to speak next? Thank you.
Here we go again. Wrapped in cloaks of secrecy, breathing life into a corpse and dancing to the tune of puppet masters. But we could realise our dream of a boutique hotel, and we can avoid the nightmare of a multi-storey cold burling wall on Cambridge Road if we play our cards right. The first point is that we are not responsible for Shambroad's commercial risk in proposing this development. That might be the way it works elsewhere, but Australian governments do not protect private enterprise from their own decisions. There are two steps to securing ownership of the land. The first is consider granting another extension of time to commence construction. That is what we are doing tonight. If we refuse, the second step may be to buy back the land. That, for reasons the public are not allowed to know, cannot be done tonight, but must be deferred to another day. And in any event, before apparently April the 11th, 2023. That is the alarming thing. I have to stand here and make a decision, but I'm not allowed to know, but the public are not allowed to know why I have done it and what my reasons are. If we are ever going to bring the public along with us, secret clauses, secret kneelings, secret negotiations must end. I firmly believe that Council should have just rejected the request for an extension out of hand. The request was not for an extension to build a hotel and hospitality school, and that was what the Silent Development Agreement was about. It was something else, and as such was an invalid request. What Shambroad should have done is approach us with a whole new contract to build this different concept. But instead of standing up to the threat of legal action, we folded. And in exchange for deferring our decision, we agreed to entertain an alternative concept. My concern of one of trust. One thing is said, but another thing is decreed. For tonight's discussion, Shambroad said they would include their revised concept for publication in last week's agenda, but then refused. And then it appears at the 11th hour. So here we are, for reasons I cannot reveal, making decisions on behalf of the public. What are they hiding? Why aren't the public allowed to know? The original TAFE proposal was a, quote, misunderstanding, they said. If that was so, that's the point at which the whole thing should have fallen over and the state government held to account for the MOU they signed in Shandong. But no, along came UTAS to change it from a Drysdale-type training school to a double master's degree in hotel management. And then the Coordinator General's right-hand man switches sides. UTAS were never going to sign up. They were well advanced in moving to online learning and relocating from the suburbs to the Hobart CBD. Kangaroo Bay was the complete opposite of that strategy. The 29 extension was going to be decided in secret, but by majority vote, this council, on my motion, moved it to the public meeting. And the extension was granted on conditions. But 6 weeks later, over Christmas again, Shamroad demanded it be made unconditional. In 2020, on my motion, Council passed a resolution calling on Shamroad to release a sale and development agreement, the contents of which were largely in the public domain. But Shamroad refused. Why? Everything's a secret. In 2021, they proposed an alternative for the site, same size, same scale of buildings. Clearly they have to monetise a Cambridge Road with large buildings for the site to be viable. But unless we buy it back, they can't be stopped. Regardless of what the concept plans say, they have planning approval to do it. In October, we were ambushed. They sought an extension on a revised concept without Cambridge Road, high-rise nightmare. But there was no time to consider or consult, so a standstill agreement was negotiated. This agreement was to be made public along with the concept plans ahead of this meeting, but with 2 business days to go, they reneged. And the public aren't allowed to know what the concept plans are, apparently they are now, nor the contents of the standstill agreement. This secrecy must stop. Clearly this proposal has been in the making for 12 months. So why wait till the eve of the election before requiring an extension on a new proposal? Why wasn't it flagged in the regular 6 monthly meetings with the former Mayor and the CEO? Mr Mayor, why weren't the outcomes of your post-election meeting with the Shamroad
Thank you, Councillor Mulder.
disclosed to the council?
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Are there any other? Thank you, Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's not a lot more I can add after the comprehensive speeches from colleagues. As we all know, there's a whole lot of history behind this. But what I would like to do is actually say I'm really sorry to our community who have endured so much stress throughout this process. Right across, I think, 4 different councils, they have been going through this. And to have this brought before us once again, last meeting of the year, all of these things rushed right now, must just add even further to that stress. As I said, there's a lot more I could go into. Like a number of colleagues around the table, I've never supported any of the extensions, and of course that won't be changing tonight. What we have before us is that Council does not consent to an extension. Council does not accept the modified development. That is what's before us, and that is how I will be voting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just very briefly, I guess firstly I was a supporter of the extension of time the last time this came to Council, and I firmly believed that COVID-19 had impacted the potential to do the work on the site. Like most of the others, I think now around this table, I will be supporting not consenting to the extension of time, because I think we are at a point now where there can be no valid reason to continue to extend the time under clause 6A of the SDA. I also will be supporting this because I agree with a number of comments that have been made that we have not had, and the community has not had, time to consider any potential development that might happen on that site in future. And I think we and the community need time to think about that. It's a very short space of time. If you looked at the timetable that has been proposed, there has to be a proposal back with us having had consultation by March.
by the end of March. That's a very short space of time with Christmas in the middle. Look forward to seeing what comes of that. But I suppose for me too, this motion tonight preserves our right to buy it back if that's what we as a council decide we want to do. We are not giving up that right. And that's really important because it means we still have control over what happens in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Walton.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and I appreciate all the contributions to date. I think the fundamental point with this is the officer's recommendations are sound, they are legally robust, and I also think they accommodate a range of potential destinations going forward in this time. And I think it's important to note there has been a change in council. Then Alderman Hume and now Councillor Hume has been involved through the Kangaroo Bay process. But for other people, they're now onto council. You do inherit, if you like, decisions of the past. And I think that the time frame here gives you the opportunity to let things percolate and work through the different proposal which is before us. I think it was unfortunate that it was lodged when it was lodged in 2016. I think that it did leave a particularly bitter aftertaste for some people, that the bulk of the time frame was occurring over Christmas. And I, in fact, wasn't at the meeting where it was approved in January 2017 because there wasn't a council meeting scheduled, and you know it's what's meant to be a quiet time generally in the Australian calendar. That was when the first initial proposal came through to council. I was indeed there when an alternate came through to change the wall to the two buildings, B and C. And I think we should all pause and reflect on buildings B and C because I think they have been the cause of much consternation and pushback. I think that there has been quite some support for a hotel, but B and C have been the things attached. It would seem from this that they will be something of the past. I think that there's still sort of scenarios where things could go ahead trying to push the old plan, but that's not what's being envisaged here. And I think time for this document and alternate to get through with the community and for us to reflect on it will be really valuable because I still believe that a hotel is the right thing to occur in that part of Kangaroo Bay. I will say this, I am somewhat battle-scarred from the expressions of interest process. And I don't know where, as I said, there's a variety of destinations, but if the end point becomes another round of EOI, I won't partake. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because things get put through to council, council has to make a decision on that, and then voila, tell people this is what's going to happen. This potentially has the opportunity for a no-surprise approach and for some shaping and discussions as we go along. The cooking school is something that just didn't seem viable, and I understand Shambroad's desire to support Tasmanian education entities and deal with them, but that's a nice ideal. Generally, dealing with monopolies isn't usually a good way to go, and unfortunately UTAS is basically the tertiary monopoly and it behaves like that. It changes its mood like most of us change its socks. In my time on council, I've been excited by a lot of developments that have come before us. Some amazing things in the Coal River Valley. A shopping centre on Glebe Hill that I think has been of great benefit. There's been quite a few. Developers that take pride in their work, that get good buy-in and that will last the test of time. I've also seen my fair share of grifters, of rent seekers, and quite frankly, as a councillor, I've had more white shoes come through my door than my 24 years as a podiatrist. I don't think that is the case with this developer. I believe that if they'd wanted to take that sort of approach, then a backhoe would have gone in there, the concrete would have been laid, they would have ticked it off, and we might have had two zombie buildings that looked like another building not that far away from it. That wasn't what has occurred, and I'm grateful for that because I think that there is an opportunity for something better. But there's a long way to go on that front. So, as I said, this is a robust recommendation that allows for a variety of different destinations, and I think it is prudent to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Colleagues, I'll hand the chair over to the Deputy Mayor to enter the debate and make my contribution on this matter. I can think of no other matter that has generated so much public interest, so much division and, sadly, so much unnecessary distress in our community than the matter before us this evening. And I'd like to thank you all for your contributions. Throughout this process, and particularly leading up to tonight's consideration, there's been a great deal for us to consider, and I'm confident that at all times, at the forefront of our collective minds, we've been cognizant of the need to ensure that the decision we make this evening is one that is in the best long-term interests of our city. And whilst I won't seek to rehash or cover previous points already so very well made during this debate, there are a few key points I would like to place on the record. Firstly, Kangaroo Bay is the jewel in our city's crown. And we have one opportunity to make sure we get it right. It is absolutely essential that whatever we decide to do with this iconic waterfront land, that its full potential is achieved and that we deliver the best possible outcome for our city. In my view, that's our job, plain and simple. It's what we've been elected to do. Now tonight, we've been asked to do two things. One, consent to a further extension of time by Shambroad, and two, accept the modified development proposal, a proposal that our community has not yet seen. Sorry, it was released some 72 minutes ago. They've not been able to provide feedback to us on that modified development proposal. For the record, and based on advice, I agreed to the two previous successful requests for extensions sought during the last iteration of Council. And I was criticised by some in our community and some in this chamber for taking that position. However, I will always make decisions I truly believe are in the best long-term interests of the residents and ratepayers of our city. And in light of COVID-19 and the legal advice that Council received at those times, in my view, there was no other option but to agree to the extension requests on those occasions. The same situations do not exist, and since the signing of the sale and development agreement between Council and Shambroad in 2017, some nearly 6 years ago, the site has laid dormant, and frankly, our community deserves better, far better. In my view, our community deserves to see action on this site. After all, we've been waiting since 2008, some 14 years, when Council first adopted, following extensive community consultation, the Kangaroo Bay Urban Design and Concept Plan that identified the long-term goal for the area as being to be a significant visitor and leisure destination within the city of Clarence and southern Tasmania. However, in my view, the reasons provided by Shambroad for the extension request do not pass the pub test, and from both the council and community perspective are totally inadequate and unacceptable. In regards to Shambroad's modified development proposal, this was only made publicly, as I said, just over an hour ago. Is there really any wonder that our community is cynical and angry by this whole process? From my perspective, the ball is now squarely in Shambroad's court, and if they are truly serious, then they have to proactively engage with our community. It's up to them to win the hearts and minds and garner support for their modified DA. That's not our job. Colleagues, as you know, if we wish to exercise a buyback clause containing the sale and development agreement, we have until the 12th of April of next year. That approach would see Council buy back the land for the original sale price of $2.44 million plus GST and stamp duty. However, we're not yet in that space. However, I fully endorse the motion before Council this evening and strongly recommend that Chambord is serious about delivering a truly iconic hotel development, one befitting our special Kangaroo Bay, then they need to step up. They need to step up or they need to step away. Either way, this matter needs to be settled. Our community deserves no less. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That now concludes my contribution. I'll take the chair back.
I shall hand the chair back to you.
And ask you for your right of reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I thank my colleagues for their contributions to this very important matter. Quite rightly, as one of the 4 new faces on council, I totally respect the histories that have been put forward by those of us who've been on this journey a lot longer and understand the battle scars, as was mentioned, as I've gone through that process. Very difficult, very frustrating. Absolutely no doubt about that. But as Councillor Warren indicated, this is not a planning matter. Councillor Hunter, this is about legal advice. Councillor Kennedy and Councillor Chong also talked about supporting the motion for a number of reasons and indeed noted the community frustration and being sorry about what's happened and the situation we find ourselves in at this point in time. All very valid commentary. But at the end of the day, this is a matter that is a contract law matter, that we must act appropriately in respect of that legal advice. And I want to be really clear that the comfort that's been sought around not extinguishing or limiting in any way Council's capacity to act in the future on any of those issues that we've discussed tonight has been provided to councillors. All of us, I don't think any of us would have be supporting this motion if those comforts hadn't been provided, if that legal advice, the advice from the officers hadn't been forthcoming. So I've extracted all the comforts that I've needed to be able to support and take carriage of this motion. I thank my colleagues for their support and understanding, and it's important that we act in the best interests of the community in terms of the contract law that applies, and I ask for the ongoing support for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I put the amended recommendation as has been circulated for item 8.4.3, the Chambord request for extension of time and modified development proposal for a hotel. I put that motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Those against? So carried. Thank you. Moving now on to item 10 of our agenda. There's a question on notice from Councillor Hume. CEO, would you like to deal with that, or we take that as read, Councillor Hume?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms Moore has an answer to those questions, and Ms Moore, maybe if you can read out each element of the question and the response into the record. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Sorry, is that on? Don't know. So the question from Councillor Hume was, in response to correspondence from a resident of Pipe Clay Esplanade, the Mayor indicated that council officers are working on a sealing gravel road strategy, so council can consider a long-term plan to prioritise upgrading of gravel roads. Part A is, do council officers have a current estimate of the cost of sealing gravel roads throughout Clarence? The answer to that is yes. This is being prepared as part of developing the sealing gravel road strategy. Early planning estimates for sealing the 41 kilometres of gravel roads is in excess of $30 million. Part B is, what's the anticipated time frame for sealing? The answer is the strategy will identify which roads should be resealed and include a program of works for sealing, including those timeframes. Part C is, are there any roads that council officers would recommend not sealing, and if so, why? The answer is that this will be included in the strategy. It's likely that a number of roads will be recommended to remain unsealed into the future, and that's on the basis of cost. Part D is, when is this draft strategy expected to be ready to be presented to councillors? The answer is the strategy should be finalised for presentation to elected members in the first quarter of 2023. Part E is that in regards to roads not made to council standards, such as the majority of Pipe Clay Esplanade, is a frontages scheme, which is with a contribution from benefiting frontages, the only way for council to take responsibility for maintaining these roads. The answer is that future funding of road upgrades will be considered on a case-by-case basis. There's also a second part to the question that says that is asking, in response to correspondence from another resident of Pipe Clay Esplanade, the Mayor indicated that Council would consult with the community about options for Pipe Clay Esplanade, including road pavement material, pedestrian access, drainage, vegetation and the foreshore edge, after receiving management options from the Pipe Clay Lagoon Local Management Plan. When is it anticipated this consultation will occur? Is there sufficient time to adopt a plan for the road for it to be considered in the 2023-24 budget? The answer is that the outcome of the Pipe Clay Lagoon Coastal Management Plan will be relevant to this project. Funding of planning and design for Pipe Clay Esplanade would be appropriate to consider in the 2023-24 budget, with any future upgrade funded in a future year, once the required work has been quantified. This planning and design project could include consultation with adjacent residents to inform the process.
Thank you, Ms Moore. Thank you. Moving on to item 10.3, answers to questions without notice from previous council meeting. There as listed. Moving on to 10.4, questions without notice. We might start with you this time, Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Friday before last, AFL Tasmania conducted operations at council-owned facilities at Wentworth Park. One of the long-term tenants of this particular area, Clarence Zebras, had actually booked through council, as I'm informed, the venue for their annual general meeting, but were unable to conduct their meeting due to the presence of AFL Tasmania, who are not a tenant of that particular room. My questions are, did AFL Tasmania actually book these rooms? Was their use of these rooms lawful? And was the sale of alcohol legal?
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Put that question to CEO. Thank you.
We'll need to take that one on notice. I have no understanding of that issue at all. So once we've concluded tonight, maybe if you could provide me with more details, that'd be great.
Thank you. Councillor Mulder, I'll give you a second bite of the cherry if you'd like one. Probably regret it now.
I'll defer, Mr Mayor. I was timed out during my debate, but there are some questions that you really do need to answer.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Please take a seat. Councillor Hunter. Thank you. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended the open day of the Olympia FC Warriors on the weekend and had a good discussion with them about their plans for the future, but also the issues they have in regards to losing their licence to participate in the National Premier League. And I was just wondering if we could have an update about the discussions with Olympia on the issues around that.
Thank you. Chief Executive Officer. Or to Mr Tracy.
Thank you. I'll take that one on notice as well, because there is quite a bit of detail that may be relevant, so I wouldn't necessarily want to skimp on that. So suffice to say, we have met with Olympia on a couple of occasions regarding their licence issue, and have ongoing meetings scheduled with them to help manage through that, and also in relation to the site.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There seems to be some changes in relation to the number of staff on the front counter in the council chambers, particularly in the planning and building services areas. Is that just as a minor change, or is there going to be a skeleton crew provided on the front counter so that members of the public can obviously have access or put their questions to and from those professionals.
Chief Executive.
Thank you, Councillor James. Through you, Mayor, Mr Lovell may want to add some more to this, but I'll start out and see where we go. When we decanted the planning section to alternative offices in Bayfield Street along with other staff, we established a duty planner on site for a trial period of around 4 to 6 weeks. What we found with that was that the necessity for a planner to be available was really only necessary in the morning, with most people calling to make a booking ahead of time or dealing with their planning items over the phone or via email. Such little demand during the afternoon necessitated or led us to a conclusion that the planner's time in this high workload environment from a planning point of view was better utilised back in the office in the afternoon. So, short answer, we have someone on site in the morning, not in the afternoon.
Thank you. Excuse me. My second question is in relation to whether I ought to seek legal advice with regard to flagging a notice of motion for the council meeting on the 16th of January 2023 and considering council to buy back the land.
Sorry, just to clarify the actual question, you're asking whether you should seek legal advice? Well, that would be a matter for you, Councillor James, but I'll ask the CEO to weigh in there.
Yeah, look, through you, Mayor, I'm not entirely sure what the question is or what I'm being asked, but I'm happy to have a conversation offline, as we have been doing.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you. As I've said previously in this chamber, I'm one of the minority of Australians that are not enamoured with compulsory voting. But my question pertains to the fact that the people in the recent election in Clarence that didn't vote did receive paperwork and have since received follow-up paperwork to state that all fines are being waived. Now, I'm not a fan of compulsory voting, so I'm not particularly a fan of fines. However, it is my understanding that this council will be paying for the letters sent out in the first place, that we will be paying for the letters sent out in the second place, and that we will be paying for the TEC's time to have cross-checked all those people to see who voted and didn't vote. This is on top of the costs of the extra postage, which is totally understandable. We budget a certain amount of money. My question pertains to, have you had the costs confirmed from the TEC that this council, that our ratepayers will be paying for the last election? And if so, how does that compare with the previous one?
Hey, Councillor Walker, CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Through you, Mayor. We, as you'll be aware, budget year on year for the election so that we don't end up with what I shall refer to as price shocks. In the context of your question, we haven't received advice yet on the total cost of the election, but it certainly has been a broadly canvassed issue with not only our council but other councils in terms of what the likely cost expectation could be for the compulsory voting. The TEC's estimate was that that wasn't going to be significant in a voting sense up to the point where votes were being counted, because they would have sent all of that information out anyway. So the expectation on additional costs for counting wasn't going to be significant in the grand scope of the cost. However, I don't have an answer regarding the follow-up in terms of people who didn't vote and any costs associated with that. So I'll take that portion of the question on notice and provide a response.
So just a part B to that question, the bottom line is it will be whatever it is, because council is a price taker, not a negotiator when it comes to this matter.
Yes.
Yep. Second question relates to Mount Rumney, a fabulous part of Clarence, like all of Clarence. When I went up there a few months ago in the top car park, it looked like a scene out of Mad Max 2 Fury Road with 2 burnout vehicles and one on its side. I've had concerns over the weekend from residents with another vehicle that crashed along the narrow bit of road in that area. It is a very narrow road, and the seclusion of the lookout at night seems to be a magnet for antisocial behaviour. It isn't necessarily the vista of an equivalence to Rosny at night. I guess my question is around, having raised this before, but are there some more visible steps we can take to improve safety in this area? And what are the ramifications potentially of closing, if you like, the final section of road to the lookout itself to cars?
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Walker, I'll need to take that on notice again, because that will be a somewhat detailed response.
Councillor Goyne, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask?
Sorry, not this evening.
Right, thank you. Councillor Darko. Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Through you, Mayor, to the CEO. Residents have been understandably concerned about the derelict property in Belrive on the corner of Cambridge and Clarence Road, and I'm hoping you may have an update for us tonight.
I might ask whether Mr Lovell has an update.
Mr Lovell, thank you.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. A planning application has been lodged for a new development. It's currently under assessment, and we're going through a process of considering the owner's consent issue, because it also relies on council land. There's a range of issues involved need to be resolved before the application can be validated. But given the amount of controversy involved in the site to date, we'll do a memo at the appropriate time to say when things happen, when it becomes valid, if it becomes valid, and when it's advertised.
Thank you, Mr Lovell. Councillor Warren, any other questions? Councillor Chong? Thank you. Councillor Kennedy?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll give you a list of break tonight.
Wonderful, thank you. Deputy Mayor, do you have any questions?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, well, I'll seek then to move a procedural motion that we move. Thank you, Councillor Hume, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. To the public gallery and those at home, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We're now moving into a closed meeting, so I look forward to seeing you all again, hopefully in the new year, but wishing you all a very Merry Christmas and all the very best for 2023. Thank you. And if we could please close the feed.